everyone, this is Miss Front Row and you're watching another segment of My Brand, My Role interview. Here with me I have assistant professor as well as T.Lang Dance Company owner, Miss T.Lang. So, hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We've been kind of laughing all day. So I'm glad that you decided to interview me.
I'm thankful you guys reached out.
That's awesome. We always look to see, who we want to interview for our next interview, and I was just kind of, searching. Sometimes we just look on, just different outlets, and I found you.
Okay.
And I was like, this would be awesome in the Atlanta area. And at first, I didn't know that you even taught at Spelman, but just through communicating, kind of found that out. So that was great. So I guess we can get started. So you're from Chicago, you got your bachelor's and master's up north, as well as starting your company in New York City first. So what brought you, what brings you to places like Spelman, or what brings you to wherever you teach and you travel?
Well, when after I received my master's, my MFA at Tisch, I was still dancing professionally, but I was encouraged by some of my professors, specifically Phyllis Lamhut, to start my own dance company, stop performing, get out there, have my own voice. And I with that encouragement, I took the risk and jumped into the choreographic scene. And it was an odd transition from performer to now creator of works. So I was in that game doing everything that I needed to do as far as getting my work seen, doing a lot of shared bill circuits, to the point it got to smaller shared bills to sharing it with another friend. It got to that point where there was a fork in the road. I had to choose which way did I want to go. And what was going to be available to me. New York was really, it is still saturated, and unfortunately there's only room for so many folk to really get that support,
right,
and that exposure, the way that their work is so ever so deserving to it. So it was strategic for me to leave New York. I also knew, even though I didn't think it would happen so soon, that I would want to be a professor of dance.
Okay, so you always wanted to be a professor?
I knew it was in the mix. I come from a family of educators. My mom was the principal of my high school. My father was also a principal and later a professor in education administration. So it's always been just in my DNA to teach. And I used to fight my parents. They would always say, when I was in undergrad, why don't you double major in education? What's your plan B? And I said, I don't have a plan B because plan A will work. It was always dance from the start. But as I was starting my own choreographic work and playing with the idea of having a company, I started doing residencies at different college campuses and was really loving that scene, that circuit, because it makes such an impact and be inspired by different institutions that support the progressiveness of dance.
Right.
It feeds your research when you're going into these other places. I got a call from Spelman to set work on their students. And the funny thing is, I really wanted to go to Spelman College as an undergrad, but when I visited the campus with my parents when I turned 16, we actually walked through the Morehouse campus, and my father was like, oh no, you're not going here. And then when we got to Spelman's campus, their dance program just wasn't what I needed at the time. So I decided, it was a hard decision, but because I really had my mind set on Spelman, but I knew my big picture, so I had to go to conservatory school. So it's a beautiful thing that it was a full circle moment when Spelman called and said they want to set work. They wanted me to set work on their students, so they commissioned a work that I did for Unmarried Girls Before They Wed on the students. This was back in 2007. Had a great experience here. This was the first time I could teach young female dancers who looked like me and moved like me and had this passion and this sponge for this craft, and it was a game changer for me. And I think I did well enough for Spelman to call and offer me a position as visiting professor, and eventually it turned into an assistant professor tenure track.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I've been here since 2008, building the dance program with my colleagues in the drum and dance department.
That's awesome. So what made you want to create your own business? I know you were saying that you had to make that decision, and your friends were telling you, just go ahead and start it. But what made you say, okay, I'm actually going to be, serious about this. I'm actually going to start it up, as opposed to, some people, they just work at another studio. But what made you say, I want to do my own?
Well, I was really inspired by the choreographers I worked for as a dancer in New York, specifically Marlise Yerby. Marlise is a Tony-nominated, Tony Award-winning choreographer. She choreographed Rent. She also has her concert
Rent?
Yeah.
I just watched Rent yesterday.
Yeah, Marlise Yerby. Phenomenal dancer, phenomenal choreographer, and dance educator and healer. So I was working with her company, Moving Spirit, and on a tour called Brown Butterfly, and seeing her work. It was a collaborative work with musicians and video technology and dramaturgies. It was a full-on production of a certain caliber. And Marlise has a long history of performing with other companies, specifically Urban Bush Women. But she branched out on her own to do concert stage work, to eventually do Broadway work and develop her own vocabulary. And she nurtured me and the other dancers who have worked with her. So I use that as a role model. Why not? Why not transition from one thing to the next? Grow, challenge yourself. Also working with the Metropolitan Opera and seeing how they take an idea and put the corporate side of it and let this thing grow, and it's been a decade institution. It's been here forever.
Right.
So I just figured I've danced enough for other folk and told their stories, and I think it was time for me to really take that challenge, that risk, and develop my own unique movement vocabulary. Try to find, be inspired by other folks' blueprint, but find and make my own plan. That's how I want to brand my dance company. Yeah. Yeah. It was just time. I was inspired and pushed, and it was only natural by the folks I worked with that I would eventually have to do that too. Right. Yeah.
So you have Post Up. Tell us more about what it is exactly and what goes into creating one of your pieces.
Okay. Post Up is a 40-minute work that has been taking me about a year and a half to create. It's still a living and breathing thing, even though we'll have the world premiere on June 6th to the 8th at the Goat Farm Arts Center. Post Up is dealing with the delusional headspace one puts oneself when they're trying to find that lost loved one or identity or thing that keeps them centered or grounded. It's inspired by a colleague and a friend of mine, Dr. Michelle Height, in the English department. She recommended, after I was telling her this idea, she recommended a book for me to read called Help to Find My People, which explains after emancipation how free folk will put postings in the newspaper wanting to find their loved one. My mom, her name was this, she was bought from here. She wore X, Y, and Z, these detailed information trying to find their lost loved one. And it didn't matter if it was decades ago or a day or month ago, they put these ads out with this blind faith and almost fantasy, expectation, wishful thinking, and prayer to find their loved ones. Sometimes in the book, it would show that Census Bureau would show that these families would recoup and they would find each other and they would be reunited, and how fantastic or tragic that could be.
Right.
So I'm using that as inspiration as well as my own personal story, losing my father in 2009 and the grief and denial that I think I'm healing, but I put myself in to, let me grab some hair, let me grab his sock and rub it together, and he'll magically come through that fantasy, that delusional space, along with looking at my old emails, being inspired by the email conversations that I had with my father of us going back and forth. So looking at these two ideas, these two inspirations, and putting it together and collaborating with a video interactive engineer, my collaborator DeGratier Daniels, who has created this magical, haunting scene where the dance is inside a cubed net, where we have images projecting in the space to give it a 3D effect, where the dancers are manipulating with the movement in space, along with my composer John Osborne. And that cat and I, we met at ADF, at the American Dance Festival, where we teach at Duke. And he's brilliant. The sound scores that he creates, I'll have to share some with you all for your audience. But so we put all of our ideas together based on this content that I provided, and we're making this 40-minute work that the Goat Farm is producing in June. And I think it's another story that's depicting these untold truths that our American history forgets to share with us in history class.
Definitely.
Yeah.